We begin our journey by entering the massive gates of the stronghold, leaving the winter landscape behind to find ourselves within the cold embrace of the castle's outer walls. This is where we first encounter the architecture of defense and the silence of a stone world at rest. Welcome, traveler. Tonight, the world beyond these walls has grown quiet and still, draped in the heavy velvet of a winter's night. I invite you to leave the warmth of your modern room and step back into a time of iron and stone, where the cold was a living presence that paced the corridors like a ghost. There is no hurry here. The shadows are long, and the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke. Let your breathing settle into a slow, steady rhythm as we walk together through the high, arched gates of a medieval stronghold. You are safe here, nestled within the history of the earth, ready to see how the world once slept. Chapter 1: The Threshold of Stone. The sun has long since vanished behind the jagged line of the distant mountains, leaving only a thin, bruised violet light in the western sky. We stand in the great courtyard, where the ground is a patchwork of frozen mud and uneven cobblestones, slick with a fine coating of evening rime. The massive curtain walls rise up around us like cliffs, blocking out the wind but holding the chill of the earth deep within their foundations. A single torch flickers in a heavy iron bracket beside the stable door, its orange flame dancing wildly as a stray gust of wind searches for a way inside. The air is sharp and tastes of salt and frost. We move toward the main keep, our boots making a hollow, rhythmic scraping sound against the cold stone steps. Before us stands the great entrance door, a massive slab of oak reinforced with heavy iron bands and thick, rounded studs. A servant, his hands wrapped in rough wool strips, leans his weight against the timber to heave it open for us. The wood groans, a slow, deep sound that vibrates in the chest as the hinges protest the winter's grip. A rush of air escapes from within, smelling of old rushes, tallow candles, and the faint, sweet scent of drying herbs. We step through the threshold, and the heavy door thuds shut behind us. Inside, the corridor is a narrow tunnel of gray limestone, lit only by a few widely spaced torches that cast long, swaying shadows across the vaulted ceiling. The light is dim and amber, barely reaching the floor where the shadows pool like dark water. The walls are cold to the touch, their surface rough and pitted, radiating a deep, persistent chill that seems to seep through even the thickest cloak. There is no central heat here, only the stagnant air trapped between these immense barriers of stone. You can hear the distant, lonely whistle of the wind as it finds a narrow arrow slit high above, a haunting flute-like note in the stillness. As we walk further, the flagstones beneath our feet feel incredibly solid, yet they pull the warmth from the soles of our boots with every step. The architecture here was built for the shock of war, not the comfort of a winter's night, and the sheer volume of stone acts like a sponge for the cold. You notice a small niche in the wall where a guttering tallow candle sits in a puddle of its own pale wax. The flame is small and weak, struggling against a draft that snakes along the floorboards. The smell of the burning fat is heavy and acrid, a scent that defines the dark corners of this ancient house. A guard stands motionless near a heavy portcullis, his wool-lined cloak pulled tight around his shoulders and his hands tucked deep into his sleeves. His halberd rests against the stone, the polished steel of the blade catching a stray glint of torchlight. He does not speak, but his breath forms a faint, rhythmic mist in the air. A white ghost that appears and vanishes with each slow exhale. His eyes are fixed on the shadows, watching the way the light plays against the dampness of the walls. There is a profound sense of isolation here, as if the castle were a ship sailing through a sea of frozen time. We pass a series of narrow wooden doors, each one bound with iron and looking as though it has not been opened in years. The wood is dark, seasoned by smoke and the dampness of the keep, and it feels cold and unresponsive as we brush past. High above, the rafters are lost in the darkness, though you can hear the occasional, faint rustle of a bird or a bat stirred by the cold. The scale of the hallway makes us feel small, a reminder that these spaces were designed to intimidate as much as to protect. Every sound, the drip of water, the crackle of a torch is amplified by the echoing stone. To our right, a narrow spiral staircase of stone winds upward into the gloom, its steps worn into smooth hollows by generations of climbing feet. The air coming down the stairs is even colder, a descending draft that carries the scent of frost and old dust. We pause for a moment, letting our eyes adjust to the deep shadows where the torchlight fails to reach. The silence here is not empty. It is a heavy, weighted thing, filled with the presence of the building itself. You realize that to live here is to be in a constant negotiation with the environment, a slow struggle to find a pocket of warmth. A servant scurries past us, carrying a heavy wooden bucket filled with fresh river rushes for the floors. He moves quickly, his head bowed, his footsteps muffled by the thick wool stockings he wears over his shoes. The dry plants in his bucket rustle with a sound like falling rain, a soft and natural noise in this world of hard surfaces. He disappears into a side room, leaving behind a faint grassy scent that lingers briefly in the cold air. His presence is a reminder of the constant labor required to keep the castle habitable, a never-ending battle against the dampness and the dark. The light from the hallway begins to brighten as we approach the end of the corridor, where the architecture opens into a broader space. You can see the flickering reflection of a much larger fire dancing against the stones of the far wall. The air here carries a different quality. It is still cold, but it is charged with the scent of roasted meat and the pungent aroma of wood ash. The transition from the narrow, lonely passages to the communal spaces of the castle is beginning. Your heart beats a little faster at the prospect of finding the hearth, even if the warmth it provides is only a temporary shield. As the last torch in the hallway gutters, we prepare to leave this echoing corridor and seek the communal heart of the castle. Ahead, a faint glow of orange light spills from a set of tall, carved doors, promising the warmth of a fire. We move toward it slowly, the scent of roasting meat and cedar smoke growing stronger with every quiet step. This was the place where the day ended and the fight against the night truly began. We follow the light into the great hall, where the fire still rages against the dark. Chapter 2. The Last Embers of the Great Hall. In this chapter, we transition from the echoing corridors into the communal heart of the castle. We experience the final, flickering moments of the evening's warmth, where the remnants of the feast and the glow of the massive hearth provide a temporary shield against the winter night. The doors to the great hall swing open, and a wall of smoky warmth meets us, carrying the heavy scent of a day's labor and the evening's rest. It is a vast, cavernous room, dominated by a central hearth, where the fire is currently a mountain of glowing orange logs. The flames leap toward the soot-stained rafters, throwing a restless, amber light over the long trestle tables that stretch into the deep shadows. The air is thick, a heavy mixture of burning cedar, roasted venison, and the sharp tang of spilt ale. Here, the castle's chill is held at bay, but only by a fragile margin of light and heat that flickers against the massive stone pillars. In the massive hearth, a heavy oak log, the size of a man's torso, settles with a muffled, resonant thud, sending a sudden spray of golden sparks spiraling into the dark chimney. The iron fireback behind the flames is black and scorched, reflecting the intense heat back into the room with a dull red glow. A servant, his face flushed a deep crimson by the fire's proximity, uses a long iron poker to shift the embers, his movements slow and rhythmic. The heat here is almost physical, a prickling sensation against the skin that feels like a blessing after the freezing journey through the dark stone corridors waiting just outside. At the high table, the Lord and his family sit in heavy, high-backed chairs of carved oak, their wool cloaks draped over their shoulders despite the fire's roar. They move with a quiet, lethargic grace, their eyes fixed on the pulsing heart of the hearth as the evening winds down. A pewter goblet sits on the table, the wine inside catching the orange light and reflecting it in a shimmering pool of deep red. Around them, the murmur of low voices rises and falls like a gentle tide, a soft hum of conversation that is punctuated only by the occasional crackle of the wood or the clink of a knife. Near the edge of the hearthstones, several large greyhounds and shaggy mastiffs are curled into tight, overlapping circles of fur. Their ribs rise and fall in a steady, peaceful rhythm, their noses tucked deep into their tails to conserve the precious heat they have gathered. Occasionally, a dog stretches a paw toward the embers, its claws clicking softly against the stone before it sighs and settles back into a deep animal sleep. The smell of their warm fur, mingled with the scent of dried grass and wood smoke, adds a primal, comforting layer to the atmosphere of the room, a silent reminder of shared survival in the cold. On a side table, a large ceramic tureen holds the last of the evening's pottage, a thick stew of barley and leeks that continues to release a slow, curling ribbon of white steam. The scent is savory and warm, carrying a hint of garden herbs and the rich fattiness of mutton. A servant reaches down to wipe a spill from the wooden surface, the cloth making a rhythmic, damp sound against the grain. In a nearby iron kettle, spiced wine is being heated, the aroma of cinnamon and cloves beginning to drift through the hall, a fragrant cloud that promises a temporary, internal warmth before the long walk to bed. High above, the ceiling is hidden behind a permanent haze of gray smoke that lingers beneath the blackened timber beams. The soot has built up over decades, a velvety layer of dark dust that seems to absorb the firelight and soften the edges of the high room. A stray draft from an arrow slit high in the wall causes the smoke to swirl in slow, lazy spirals, looking like ghostly dancers in the amber gloom. The rafters groan faintly under the weight of the roof's heavy slate, a sound that is muffled by the thickness of the thatch and the quiet, heavy atmosphere of the hall as the hour grows late. The flagstone floor is covered in a thick layer of dried river rushes, their pale green and straw-yellow stalks crunching softly underfoot. Sprigs of lavender and dried mint have been scattered among them, releasing a faint, floral sweetness whenever someone treads upon the floor. The rushes act as a crude carpet, muffling the sound of footsteps and providing a thin, insulating barrier against the deep, radiating cold of the stone beneath. A cat moves silently through the grass, its tail twitching as it searches for a warm spot near the hearth, its golden eyes reflecting the dying fire like two tiny glowing coals in the dark. Along the walls, iron sconces hold thick tallow candles that sputter and hiss as they burn down toward their metal sockets. The wax drips in slow, viscous streams, forming pale mounds on the stone ledges below. The light they provide is flickering and uncertain, creating a world of dancing shadows where the faces of the servants appear and vanish in the gloom. The smell of the burning animal fat is acrid and heavy, a sharp contrast to the sweet wood smoke of the hearth. A servant moves from sconce to sconce with a long snuffer, his shadow stretching across the floor like a tall, silent giant. Despite the fire's intensity, the cold begins to creep back into the hall from the far, dark corners where the light cannot reach. You can feel the sharp bite of a draft moving across your ankles, a thin ribbon of freezing air that has found a gap beneath the heavy tapestry hanging over the arched doorway. The Lord pulls his fur-lined mantle tighter around his chest, his shoulders hunching as the realization of the coming night settles over the room. The transition from the communal warmth of the feast to the lonely chill of the bedchamber is near, and the warmth of the hearth now feels like a precious, fleeting treasure. One by one, the guests rise from the benches, their shadows swaying as they reach for their cloaks. The fire has begun to settle, the bright flames giving way to a bed of glowing, rhythmic embers that pulse with a deep ruby light. A servant banks the fire for the night, pulling a layer of ash over the coals to preserve the heat until morning. The sound of the iron shovel scraping against the stone is a final, cold signal that the social hour has ended. You take one last long breath of the warm, smoky air, knowing the quiet climb to the bedchamber waits. Chapter 3. The Ascent to the Silent Keep. In this chapter, we leave the dying warmth of the great hall to navigate the cold, vertical world of the castle's interior. We climb the spiral stone staircases and move through the shadowed corridors, where the wind whistles through arrow slits, feeling the temperature drop with every step. The heavy oak doors of the great hall groan as they close behind us, the solid thud echoing through the stone passage like a final goodbye to the fire. Immediately, the temperature drops, and the air turns sharp and thin, biting at the exposed skin of your face. The lingering scent of wood smoke is replaced by the smell of damp limestone and the faint, metallic tang of cold iron. You pull your wool cloak tighter, the heavy fabric rustling against your tunic as you adjust to the deep, blue-gray shadows of the corridor. The silence here is immense, broken only by the rhythmic scrape of your boots on the frozen flagstones. A single torch is mounted in a rusted iron cresset near the base of a spiral staircase, its light a frantic orange tongue licking the damp wall. The stone around the bracket is blackened with old soot, a dark stain that looks like a shadow frozen in place. As you approach, the flame flickers wildly in a draft that snakes down from the upper floors, causing the shadows of the stairs to dance in a dizzying, rhythmic motion. You reach out to steady yourself, your fingers touching the cold, rough surface of the wall. The stone feels like ice, pulling the heat from your hand instantly through your leather glove. You begin to climb the narrow staircase, the steps winding upward in a tight, clockwise spiral designed for a defender's advantage. Each step is a heavy block of gray granite, worn into a shallow, smooth hollow in the center by centuries of climbing feet. The air in the stairwell is even colder than the hallway, trapped in a vertical chimney of stone that has not felt the sun's warmth in months. Your breathing becomes a rhythmic, heavy sound in the cramped space, and with every exhale, a soft cloud of white mist forms before your eyes, illuminated briefly by the torchlight below before it vanishes into the dark. Halfway up the climb, you pass a narrow arrow slit carved deep into the thickness of the outer wall. A sliver of moonlight, pale and silver as a blade, cuts through the opening and falls across the stone steps in a sharp, geometric line. The wind moans as it is forced through the narrow gap, a high-pitched, lonely whistle that vibrates in the stone itself. You pause for a moment to look out, seeing the white, frozen landscape far below and the dark silhouettes of the forest trees. The draft hitting your face is a knife of pure ice, carrying the scent of fallen snow and frozen pine needles. The shadows on the stairs grow deeper as you move further away from the torch below, leaving you in a world of charcoal and deep indigo. Your hand follows the curve of the central stone pillar, the newel, which is cold and slick with a fine layer of winter condensation. The darkness feels heavy, like a physical weight pressing against your shoulders, making the climb feel longer than it truly is. You focus on the steady clack thump of your boots, a repetitive sound that keeps you grounded in the silence. The castle above is a silent giant, its heart made of cold, unyielding rock. Reaching the landing of the upper keep, the space opens into a long, straight gallery that stretches into the darkness. The floor here is made of wide wooden planks of dark oak, which creak and groan softly under your weight as the timber contracts in the winter chill. The air is stagnant and heavy, smelling of old dust and the faint, dry aroma of seasoned wood. High above, the ceiling is a series of shadow-filled arches where the light from a distant window fails to reach. You move slowly, your breath still forming those small, ghostly clouds that dance in the dim, gray light of the hallway. Along the gallery wall, several large tapestries hang from iron rods, their woven scenes of forest hunts and floral gardens lost in the gloom. As you walk past, a stray draft from a window causes the heavy fabric to sway almost imperceptibly, the bottom edges brushing against the floor with a soft, shushing sound. The figures in the weave, hounds, stags, and hunters, seem to shift in the low light, as if they too were seeking a way to move closer to the warmth. The wool of the tapestries is thick and dusty, acting as a fragile barrier between you and the radiating cold of the limestone behind them. You pass a small wooden niche where a statue of a saint stands, the figure's stone hands folded in a gesture of eternal peace. A small oil lamp has been left at its feet, the flame a tiny, trembling point of yellow light that barely illuminates the saint's weathered face. The smell of the burning oil is faint and nutty, providing a brief sensory anchor in the otherwise scentless cold of the gallery. You watch the flame flicker as you pass, the light reflecting off the statue's polished stone eyes for a fleeting second. The silence of the keep is profound, a weighted, ancient stillness. At the end of the gallery, a massive wooden door stands as the final gate to your bedchamber. The timber is thick and dark, reinforced with iron studs that are tipped with a fine layer of white frost. A heavy iron latch, cold and unforgiving, waits for your hand, its surface dull and gray in the moonlight. You pause, hearing the distant, muffled sound of a dog barking in the lower courtyard, a reminder that life still exists beyond this silent stone world. The draft beneath the door is a steady, freezing stream that pulls at the hem of your cloak, inviting you into the dark room. You reach out and grip the iron handle, the metal biting into your palm, with a sharp, crystalline cold. The latch lifts with a heavy clack that sounds like a hammer strike in the quiet of the keep, and you push the door open slowly. It swings inward on silent, well-oiled hinges, revealing a chamber that is filled with the pale silver glow of the moon. The air inside is still and hollow, a frozen pocket of space that has been waiting for your arrival. You step over the threshold, the wood of the floorboards creaking under your boots as you enter your stone box for the night. Looking back into the dark gallery one last time, you see the long blue shadows and the distant, flickering light of the saint's lamp. The climb is over, but the coldest part of the night is just beginning. You pull the heavy door shut, the latch clicking into place with a definitive metallic sound that seals you inside the bedchamber. The room is a silent cathedral of stone and shadow, where the frost on the windowpane looks like a forest of silver ferns. You are now in the heart of the keep, ready to face the long, freezing hours until the dawn. The transition from the movement of the climb to the stillness of the room is a slow, heavy shift in the spirit. You stand in the center of the floor, watching the moonlight crawl across the bed curtains, your heart still beating with the rhythm of the stairs. The castle around you is a vast, frozen fortress, and your bed is the only island of hope in this sea of stone. You move toward the hearth, where a few dying embers pulse with a faint, ruby light. The preparation for sleep begins now, a series of slow and quiet rituals designed to keep the life within you warm. Chapter 4. The Cold Bedchamber. The stone walls of the bedchamber are not merely a boundary. They are a presence that breathes a deep, ancient chill into the very center of the room. In this private space, the grandeur of the castle falls away, leaving only the stark reality of surviving a winter night inside a fortress of limestone and shadow. You have left the flickering life of the corridors behind and now stand in the absolute stillness of your private chamber. The air here is noticeably heavier than in the gallery, a stagnant pool of cold that has settled into every corner and hollow. A single, high window allows a thin beam of moonlight to pierce the darkness, illuminating a rectangular patch of the floor where the frost on the stone looks like a dusting of fine silver salt. You move toward the center of the room, your breath following you in a slow, swirling mist that catches the moonlight. The chamber feels less like a room and more like a silent, frozen cathedral. The walls are made of massive limestone blocks, their surfaces rough and damp to the touch. In the dim light, you can see a faint, glistening sheen of moisture where the warmth of your breath has condensed against the freezing stone. This is the sweeting of the castle, a constant struggle between the cold exterior and the fragile life within. To hide this weeping stone, heavy woolen tapestries have been hung from iron rods along the walls. They depict a stag being chased through a dark forest, the woven threads thick and dusty. As you pass, the bottom of the tapestry sways slightly, revealing the dark, wet void of the stone behind it. In the corner of the room, a small stone fireplace holds the remains of a fire that was lit hours ago. The flames have long since died, leaving only a bed of gray ash and a few stubborn embers that pulse with a faint, dying ruby light. An iron fireback, embossed with the image of a roaring lion, stands behind the coals, its surface still radiating a ghostly, weak warmth that vanishes just inches from the hearth. The smell of cold ash and charred oak hangs in the air, a dry and dusty scent that mingles with the dampness of the room. You realize that this fire was never meant to warm the chamber, only to provide a flicker of light. The window is a narrow opening set deep into the thickness of the wall, its wooden shutters closed tight against the night. The planks are made of seasoned oak, bound with iron hinges that creak softly as the wind pushes against them from the outside. A thin line of white frost has formed along the seams where the wood meets the stone, a crystalline boundary that marks the persistence of the winter. You reach out and touch the shutter, feeling the vibration of the wind as it moans through the arrow slit. The wood is freezing, as unresponsive as the stone, a fragile shield against the vast, howling darkness of the northern winter. On a small wooden table near the bed sits a ceramic wash basin filled with water for the morning. The surface is no longer liquid. A thin, brittle sheet of ice has formed across the top, looking like a pane of dark, clouded glass. You gently tap the surface with your finger, and the ice cracks with a sharp, crystalline sound that seems unusually loud in the quiet room. The shards float in the dark water, their edges jagged and silver in the moonlight. This frozen Wahnsinn is a silent measure of the room's temperature, a reminder that the air you are breathing is barely warmer than the world outside the walls. The floor is covered in a fresh layer of dried river rushes, their stalks crunching under your boots with a rhythmic, papery sound. The scent of dried grass and old earth rises from the floorboards, a humble and natural aroma in this world of stone. Scattered among the rushes are dried sprigs of rosemary and thyme, their fragrance released in tiny, aromatic bursts as you walk. The rushes are a few inches thick, providing a small, padded barrier between your feet and the radiating chill of the flagstones. It is a soft, shifting carpet that holds the memories of the fields far below the castle walls. A single tallow candle sits in a heavy iron holder on the bedside chest, its wick charred and black. You strike a spark and light it, watching as a small, trembling flame slowly consumes the pale animal fat. The light is yellow and dim, casting a long, swaying shadow that stretches across the bed curtains and climbs the ceiling rafters. The smell of the burning tallow is pungent and greasy, a sharp scent that cuts through the musty dampness of the room. The flame flickers in a draft you cannot see, bowing low before standing tall again, a fragile point of life in the immense, creeping dark. In the corner stands a heavy chest of dark oak, its lid carved with intricate geometric patterns and bound with rusted iron straps. Inside are the heavy wool cloaks and fur mantles that you have worn throughout the day, their fibers still holding the faint scent of the great hall's wood smoke. The wood of the chest is cold and smells of cedar and thyme, a solid and unmoving presence in the room. You move toward it to lay down your outer belt, the iron buckle making a sharp clink against the timber. Every sound you make is a lonely event, echoing briefly before being swallowed by the heavy silence of the stone. The bed itself looms in the center of the chamber, a massive wooden frame of carved walnut that sits high off the floor. The heavy wool curtains are currently drawn back, held in place by thick cords of twisted hemp. The shadows inside the bed are deep and inviting, a dark hollow where the cold air seems to pause. You can see the layers of bedding piled high, linen, wool, and fur waiting to receive you. The bed is not just furniture. It is a fortress within a fortress. A carefully constructed environment designed to trap and hold the warmth of a human body through the long, freezing hours. As you prepare to remove your heavy outer cloak, the cold of the room hits your shoulders with a sudden, sharp intensity. It is a physical weight, a creeping numbness that makes your movements slow and deliberate. You watch the way the candlelight plays across the frost on the window, the patterns, looking like a forest of tiny silver ferns. The chamber is a place of absolute stillness, a stone box where time seems to slow down and the outside world ceases to exist. You realize that your only task now is to navigate the transition from the cold air to the safety of the bedclothes. You stand for a moment, looking at the contrast between the dark, damp stone of the walls and the soft, inviting textures of the bedding. The candle gutters once, twice, and then settles into a steady, quiet burn. The wind continues its lonely music against the shutters, a reminder that the world is vast and unforgiving beyond these thick limestone barriers. You feel a deep sense of isolation, but also a quiet resolve. The room is a test of endurance, a place where the simple act of sleeping becomes a ritual of survival and a quiet victory over the winter night. The ritual of the night is now fully underway, and the bedchamber has become your entire world. You move toward the bedside, your shadow trailing behind you on the rush-covered floor like a silent companion. The cold is a constant, steady pressure, but the promise of the blankets is close at hand. As you reach out to pull the first heavy wool coverlet back, you know that the journey into the night is only just beginning. The bed is a waiting vessel, ready to carry you through the darkness toward the first gray light of the castle dawn. Chapter 5. The Anatomy of the Mattress. The mattress is the foundation of the night's rest, a carefully layered construction of organic materials designed to lift the sleeper away from the frozen stone and provide a soft, insulating cradle. Understanding the physical reality of medieval bedding begins with the rustle of straw and the weight of feathers. You stand before the great bed, its massive frame of carved walnut rising from the rush-covered floor like a dark island in a sea of gray shadow. After the biting cold of the stone corridors, the bed looks like a promise of survival, a vessel designed to hold the warmth of a human life through the long hours of the winter night. You reach out and touch the heavy wooden post, feeling the intricate carvings of vines and leaves beneath your fingertips. The wood is seasoned and hard, cool to the touch, but lacking the sharp, aggressive chill of the limestone walls that surround you. It is a sturdy anchor in a room made of drafts and silence. The lowest layer of your bed is the straw tick, a massive sack of heavy linen stuffed to bursting with dried river reeds and meadow grass. As you press your hand into the mattress, it responds with a loud, rhythmic crunching sound, like the noise of dry leaves being crushed under a heavy boot. The straw provides the primary insulation, a thick mat of air-filled stalks that prevents the cold of the floor from rising up through the frame. It is a rustic, humble layer, but in the heart of winter, this dried vegetation is more precious than gold. Every shift you make will be echoed by this dry, papery rustle. Earlier in the day, a servant would have beaten the straw tick with a long wooden rod to break up the lumps and fluff the compressed stalks. You can still see the indentations where the linen has been stretched tight over the fresh filling. The act of making the bed was a vigorous, noisy ritual, a necessary chore to ensure the mattress didn't become a hard, flat slab by nightfall. The sound of the rod hitting the linen would have echoed through the keep, a domestic drumbeat marking the passage of time. Now, the straw sits tall and inviting, its uneven surface promising a firm but yielding support for your tired limbs. As the straw is compressed by your weight, it releases a faint, dry aroma that fills the space inside the bed curtains. It is the scent of a lost summer, the smell of sun-baked hay, dust, and the earthy sweetness of a riverbank. Mixed within the straw are handfuls of dried wormwood and pennyroyal, herbs added not just for their fragrance, but to discourage the small insects that often call a straw mattress home. The scent is pungent and slightly bitter, a sharp green note that cuts through the musty smell of the stone chamber. It is a sensory reminder of the natural world, hidden away within the fortress. Resting directly on top of the straw tick is the feather bed, a luxurious, heavy sack filled with the soft down of geese and ducks. This is the layer that provides the warmth and the softness, a plush cushion that contours to your body and traps the heat of your skin. The feathers shift with a soft hushing sound as you smooth the surface, feeling the incredible lightness of the filling beneath the linen. Unlike the straw, which resists you, the feather bed invites you to sink deep into its center. In a world of hard stone and iron, this softness feels like an impossible, wonderful luxury. The linen that encases both the straw and the feathers is a heavy cream-colored fabric woven by hand on a great loom. It is coarse and sturdy, with a visible grain that feels slightly rough against your palm. This linen has been washed in lye and dried over a fire, leaving it with a faint, smoky scent that lingers in the fibers. It is not the smooth, cool silk of the South, but a practical, durable cloth designed to withstand the friction of a long winter. The seams are thick and hand-stitched, a testament to the hours of labor required to create even the simplest part of the bed. As you lean your weight against the mattress, the wooden frame beneath you gives a slow, deep groan. The joinery of the bed is held together with wooden pegs rather than iron nails, allowing the timber to move and breathe as the temperature shifts. The sound is like the creaking of a ship's hull at sea, a rhythmic, wooden music that speaks of the bed's age and strength. You can feel the vibration in the floorboards, a low-frequency hum that settles into your bones. The bed is a living thing, responding to your presence with its own ancient and structural voice in the dark. The height of the bed is a strategic defense against the creeping cold of the castle floor. By rising nearly 3 feet off the flagstones, the sleeper escapes the lowest, freezing layer of air where the drafts are most intense. You look down at the space beneath the bed frame, a dark and shadowed hollow where the dust motes dance in the candlelight. In some castles, this space is used to store wooden chests or even small trundle beds for servants. But tonight, it is an empty void, a buffer zone between you and the frozen earth. The height makes the act of climbing in feel like an ascent. Within the straw and feathers, there is the quiet reality of the castle's smaller inhabitants. Despite the herbs, a stray flea or a tiny beetle may occasionally rustle through the bedding, a small, rhythmic tick-tick sound that is lost in the larger silence of the room. You do not fear them. They are a natural part of medieval life, as persistent as the dampness or the smoke. You simply smooth the linen once more, a quiet gesture of order in a world that is often chaotic and wild. The bed is a sanctuary, but it is one that remains connected to the earth and all its humble creatures. You take a final look at the mattress, its layers of white linen and dark wood glowing softly in the guttering candlelight. The preparations are almost complete. The straw is fluffed, the feathers are deep, and the wooden frame stands ready to bear your weight through the coming hours. The bed looks immense, a grand and silent landscape of fabric and organic warmth. You realize that to sleep here is to be cradled by the labor of many hands, the weavers, the harvesters, and the craftsmen who built this fortress of rest. The cold of the room feels a little further away as you gaze at the inviting pillows. The silence of the bedchamber is now filled with the anticipation of rest. You have explored the foundation, the straw, and the soft down, and now you are ready to add the final, heavy layers of protection. The transition from the air of the room to the heat of the bed is the most critical moment of the night. You reach for the first of the heavy wool blankets, the fabric thick and dark, ready to seal the warmth inside the mattress. The journey into the blankets is the next step in your ritual of survival. A slow and careful movement toward the deep, heavy sleep of the winter. As you prepare to climb into the high bed, you think of the blankets and fur covers waiting on the chest. They are the final armor you will don tonight. The bed is a waiting vessel, and you are ready to be its passenger through the dark. We move now to the heavy fabrics and the curtains that will create your final cocoon. Chapter 6. Blankets, Fur, and Bed Curtains. In this chapter, we explore the final defenses against the winter night. The heavy textiles and the wooden canopy that create a private, warm sanctuary. It is here that the sleeper finally retreats from the cavernous room into a small, cloth-bound world of their own making. With the foundation of the mattress prepared, you now turn your attention to the heavy stack of textiles waiting upon the cedar chest. These are not merely blankets. They are your final armor against a night that wishes to steal the very heat from your skin. You reach for the first layer, A heavy blanket of undyed sheep's wool, its surface thick and slightly coarse to the touch. The fabric is dense, woven on a broad loom to be wind-resistant and heavy enough to press the air out from beneath it. As you lift it, the wool releases a faint, earthy scent of lanolin and distant hillsides, a comforting and primal aroma that speaks of the natural world's protection. You spread the wool blanket over the linen sheets, the fabric settling with a soft, muffled thump against the mattress. The weight of the wool is substantial, a physical pressure that seems to anchor the bed to the floor. You smooth the surface with your hands, feeling the tiny, rhythmic bumps of the weave and the warmth that already begins to gather where your palms rest. This is the first barrier, a thick shield designed to trap the warmth of the mattress and prevent it from escaping into the freezing heights of the stone chamber. The dark, natural gray of the wool catches the yellow candlelight, looking like a field of soft twilight. On top of the wool, you place the winter coverlet, a masterpiece of medieval warmth made from the pelts of dozens of forest animals. In this castle, it is a heavy mantle of fox and rabbit fur. The different skins, sewn together in a mosaic of browns, silvers, and deep charcoals. You run your fingers through the fur, feeling the incredible softness of the undercoat and the sleek, protective guard hairs. The fur is cool at first, but it holds a deep, secret heat that will become your greatest ally as the midnight hour approaches. It has a slight musky scent, a lingering ghost of the wild woods that now serves to keep you alive. The weight of the fur coverlet is immense, pressing down upon the bed like a heavy, silent hand. When you lie beneath it, this weight becomes a comfort, a sensory reassurance that you are being held in place. Far from the drafts that swirl around the room, you watch as the candlelight glimmers along the tips of the silver fox fur, creating a shimmering, liquid effect that makes the bed look as though it were covered in a layer of soft, dark water. Every inch of this coverlet has been prepared by a furrier's steady hand, each stitch a small, hidden defense against the creeping frost that even now grows on the window. You step back for a moment to look at the bed's canopy, the heavy wooden tester that hangs like a dark roof over your sleeping space. From this frame hang the bed curtains, massive, floor-length drapes of heavy crimson wool, lined with a layer of fine linen to block the wind. These curtains are the most critical piece of medieval sleeping technology. They are the walls of your private fortress. When they are open, the bed is part of the room, vulnerable to every draft that snakes through the arrow slits. But when they are closed, the bed becomes a world unto itself, a small square room made entirely of fabric and warmth. You reach out and grip the heavy cord that holds the side curtains in place, the hemp rope feeling rough and sturdy in your hand. With a slow, deliberate pull, you release the fabric, and the curtains swing shut with a soft, rhythmic swish that echoes against the stone walls. The iron rings at the top of the posts slide along the rods with a melodic, metallic tink-tink, a sound that signals the official end of the day. As the fabric falls into place, the room outside vanishes, replaced by a deep, red-tinted gloom. The silence inside the curtains is different. It is muffled, heavy, and intensely private. Inside this fabric cocoon, the air feels different almost immediately. The drafts that were tugging at your hair and neck just moments ago are now silenced, blocked by the thick layers of wool and linen. You are left in a small, square space that is barely larger than the mattress. A sanctuary of stillness where your own breath begins to warm the air. The candlelight from outside the curtains is now a soft, diffused glow that filters through the crimson fabric, turning the interior of the bed into a world of warm amber and deep shadow. It feels as though you have stepped out of the castle and into a secret, hidden tent. You crawl onto the high mattress, the straw beneath you giving its familiar, papery crunch as you settle your weight. The movement causes the bed curtains to sway slightly, a rhythmic motion that creates a gentle, hushing sound against the wooden frame. You reach out to ensure the curtains overlap perfectly, sealing the last few gaps where the cold might try to find a way in. You are now truly enclosed, a passenger in a ship made of timber and wool, sailing through the freezing sea of the night. The immense stone walls of the castle are now just a distant memory, hidden behind the red veil of the drapery. You pull the heavy wool and fur layers up to your chin, feeling the immediate and wonderful pressure of the weight against your chest. The linen sheet is cool against your skin, but the wool above it is already beginning to glow with the heat of your body. You tuck the edges of the blankets beneath the sides of the mattress, a rhythmic and methodical movement that seals you into a textile sandwich. This tucking is a ritual of security, a way of ensuring that no matter how much you turn in your sleep, the sanctuary of the heat will remain unbroken and the cold will stay at the threshold. Lying there, you listen to the sounds of the night from within your fabric walls. You can hear the distant, lonely howl of the wind as it hits the battlements, a high and mournful note that feels worlds away. The occasional pop of a dying ember in the hearth reaches you as a muffled, insignificant sound, like a tiny drum heard from a great distance. Inside the curtains, the only reality is the steady, rhythmic sound of your own breathing and the soft rustle of the bedding when you shift your legs. The world has shrunk to this small, safe space, and for the first time since the sun went down, you feel truly warm. The darkness inside the curtains is soft and velvety, lacking the sharp, frightening edges of the shadows in the stone chamber. You watch the faint, pulsing glow of the candle through the fabric, a steady heartbeat of light that slowly fades as the wax is consumed. The scent of the lavender in the rushes below drifts up through the floorboards, a tiny, floral reminder of the earth that lingers in the still air of the bed. You feel a deep, heavy tiredness settle into your limbs, a relaxation that only comes when the body finally stops fighting the environment and accepts the grace of warmth. The bed is no longer just a place to lie down. It is a masterpiece of survival, a victory of human ingenuity over the relentless frost. You realize that while the castle is a fortress for the Lord's land, this bed is a fortress for his spirit, a place where he can finally lay down his burdens and find rest. The weight of the furs, the thickness of the wool, and the silence of the curtains all work together to create a truce with the winter. You are ready now to drift into the deep, quiet hours, knowing that the cold may rage outside, but inside your cocoon, the night is kind. As your eyes grow heavy, you realize that while fabric and wood provide the shield, there is another ancient way to multiply the warmth within these curtains. Tomorrow's light is far off, and the long night is best shared with others who seek the same refuge. You feel the bed shift slightly as the presence of companions begins to gather, bringing the living heat of other hearts to your side. Chapter 7. The Living Hearth. While fabric and wood provide a shield, the most ancient source of heat is the living body itself. In the deep of a castle winter, sharing a bed was not a matter of luxury or privacy, but a vital strategy for multiplying warmth against the relentless stone. You are tucked beneath the heavy furs, but even the thickest wool cannot generate its own heat. It can only trap what is provided. You feel the heavy bed frame groan once more as a large, shaggy deerhound leaps onto the mattress, its massive paws making a rhythmic thump crunch against the straw. The dog circles twice, its claws catching briefly in the wool, before it collapses into a solid, heavy weight across your feet. You feel the immediate radiation of its animal heat, a pulsing warmth that begins to thaw your frozen toes through your linen stockings. The hound lets out a long, shuddering sigh of contentment, its breathing settling into a deep and steady pace. Behind the crimson curtains, the mattress shifts again as a trusted companion or family member slides into the space beside you. There is no social distance in the heart of a medieval winter. Bodies are simply heat sources to be shared and guarded. You hear the rustle of their linen nightshirt as they settle in, and the immediate proximity of another person creates a living hearth within the bedding. Back to back, you form a single unified center of warmth, your heartbeats echoing each other in the quiet. The air inside the curtains begins to lose its sharp edge, growing soft and humid with the collective breath of the sleepers. At the foot of the high bed, on a small pallet of straw laid directly upon the rushes, a young servant curls up beneath a single tattered wool cloak. He is positioned there to be close to the master's warmth and to stay within the small zone of heat protected by the bed's heavy drapery. You can hear his soft, rhythmic snoring, a sound that is as much a part of the castle night as the wind in the towers. Though he lacks the feather bed, the proximity of the great bed and the dogs provides him with a margin of survival he would not have in the open hall. He is a silent guardian, kept alive by the overflow of noble warmth. The scent inside the curtains changes as more bodies occupy the space, becoming a thick, earthy mixture of unwashed wool, clean linen, and the musky odor of the hounds. It is not an unpleasant smell. In this world, it is the scent of safety, a sign that you are not alone in the dark. You reach down to rest a hand on the shaggy back of the dog at your feet, feeling the steady rise and fall of its ribs and the wiry texture of its coat. The animal's heat is intense, a concentrated fire that keeps the blood moving in your extremities. In the absolute silence of the keep, this shared vitality is your strongest defense. Beyond your private chamber, in the smaller rooms where the lower servants sleep, the strategy of shared warmth is even more pronounced. In a room no larger than a pantry, 4 or 5 men might huddle together on a single wide pallet, their cloaks overlapping to create a massive multi-layered blanket. They sleep in a tangle of limbs, a human puzzle designed to minimize the surface area exposed to the freezing air. The sound of their collective breathing is a low, heavy hum that vibrates against the timber walls. To sleep alone in such a place was a luxury few could afford, and even fewer truly desired when the frost began to bite. In the village cottages huddled at the base of the castle hill, families share their beds not just with each other, but with their most valuable livestock. A goat or a small calf might be tethered near the hearth, its large, warm body providing a radiant heat that the dying embers cannot match. You can imagine the children curled together in the straw, their small faces tucked into the wool of a sheep, the animals rhythmic, chewing a soothing domestic lullaby. This closeness with the natural world is a humble but effective technology, a way of turning the farm's survival into the family's comfort through the long, dark hours. Even for the nobility, the boundaries of rank often soften when the temperature drops below freezing. A lady might invite her youngest maids to sleep in the trundle bed pulled from beneath her own, or even to share the edges of her great mattress. In the small hours of the night, the distinction between servant and master is blurred by the universal need for heat. You feel the mattress settle into a final, comfortable shape as everyone finds their place in the textile sandwich. The shared warmth is a silent contract. a mutual agreement to hold the winter at bay through the simple, honest presence of the body. You lie perfectly still, listening to the symphony of sleep within your fabric fortress. There is the high, thin whistle of the wind through the shutters, the deep, guttural sigh of the hound, and the soft, melodic breathing of your companion. These sounds create a sense of profound intimacy, a feeling of being part of a living, breathing machine of survival. You realize that the castle's strength is not just in its stone and iron, but in this quiet, communal defiance of the cold. The weight of the blankets above you is matched by the warmth of the life beside you, creating a perfect equilibrium. The darkness inside the curtains is now a rich, heavy indigo, illuminated only by the faint, pulsing glow of the candle through the wool. You feel the tension leave your shoulders as the collective heat finally penetrates the deep core of your body. Your hands, once stiff and pale, are now supple and warm beneath the fur coverlet. The shared breath of the sleepers acts as a natural humidifier, softening the dry, smoky air of the chamber and making every inhale feel easier. You are no longer an individual fighting the frost. You are part of a pack, a tribe, a household united in rest. The dog at your feet shifts its weight, its head resting heavily on your ankles. And you realize how much of your comfort depends on this simple animal loyalty. The hound asks for nothing but a place to lie, and in return, it provides a heat that no fireplace could ever replicate. You close your eyes, the warmth of the living hearth pulling you down into the first heavy layers of sleep. The castle may be a monument to power, but tonight it is a sanctuary of proximity. You feel the ancient, primal peace of the shared bed, a tradition as old as the first fires in the first caves. As the midnight hour approaches, the silence of the shared room becomes a sacred thing, a fragile peace guarded by the thickness of the castle walls. You are ready to let the world outside the curtains vanish entirely, surrendering to the heavy rhythmic pull of the collective slumber. The cold continues to pace the stone floors outside, but here, in the heart of the blankets, the fire of life is burning bright and steady. You drift into a dreamless state, carried by the warmth of your companions through the darkest part of the night. Chapter 8. Night Clothes and Warming Tools. In this chapter, we prepare the body itself for the long hours of stillness, layering the skin in protective fabrics and utilizing the few ingenious tools designed to preheat the frozen bedding. Before the eyes close, there is a final methodical ritual of dressing and warming that serves as the last line of defense against the night. The time has come to strip away the heavy, travel-stained layers of the day. But in this stone chamber, undressing is a delicate and rapid dance against the biting air. You stand beside the bed, the flickering candlelight catching the silver frost on your discarded cloak as it falls to the cedar chest. The moment your outer wool tunic is removed, the cold hits your skin like a physical weight, a sharp and sudden reminder of the castle's true nature. You move quickly, your fingers clumsy and numb as you reach for your night linens. Every second spent exposed to the stagnant air of the room feels like a battle, a brief but intense struggle to maintain the heat you gathered by the great hall's fire. You pull a long, loose nightshirt of heavy bleached linen over your head, the fabric feeling cool and slightly stiff against your skin. This garment is far more substantial than any modern cloth, woven with a density designed to trap a thin layer of air against your body. It reaches down to your shins, the hem rustling softly as it brushes against your wool stockings. The linen carries the clean, faint scent of lye soap and the dry aroma of the sun-drenched fields where it was first harvested. As the fabric settles, your body begins to warm the fibers, creating a fragile private climate that moves with you as you prepare for the final climb into the high bed. Next comes the nightcap, or coif, a small, snug-fitting hat made of doubled linen or soft wool. You pull it over your ears and tie the thin fabric laces beneath your chin, the movement slow and deliberate in the dim light. In the Middle Ages, the head was seen as the primary escape route for the body's vital heat, and to sleep with an uncovered skull was to invite the night chill into your very bones. The cap feels secure and warm, muffling the distant sounds of the castle and making the world feel a little smaller, a little more contained. It is the final piece of your personal armor, a textile crown for the king of this small, shadowed room. Your feet, already aching from the cold of the flagstones, require their own special protection. You sit on the edge of the bed and wrap your feet in long strips of soft, brushed wool, overlapping the fabric until your toes are cocooned in a thick, insulating layer. These foot wraps are a humble but essential technology, preventing the circulation from slowing in the furthest reaches of your body. The wool is scratchy but reassuring, a coarse and honest texture that promises to hold the warmth you are about to steal from the bedding. You tuck the ends of the wraps securely, feeling the immediate relief as the radiating cold of the floor is finally blocked by the thick fibers. A soft clink at the door announces the arrival of a servant carrying the warming pan, a long-handled vessel made of polished brass with a perforated lid. Inside, several glowing coals from the great hall's hearth hiss and pop, their orange light peeking through the holes in the metal like tiny, angry eyes. The servant moves with practiced grace, sliding the heavy pan back and forth between your linen sheets with a rhythmic, shushing sound. A faint scent of scorched linen and wood ash begins to rise from the bed, a dry and smoky perfume that signals the arrival of the only true heat the room will ever know. The brass catches the candlelight, glowing with a dull, golden luster. You watch as the servant focuses on the area where your feet will rest, the pan moving in slow, deliberate circles. The heat from the coals radiates through the brass and into the heavy wool blankets, creating a localized pocket of warmth that the air of the room cannot touch. A tiny wisp of steam rises from the mattress as the dampness of the castle is briefly chased away by the intense fire within the pan. The sound of the coals shifting inside the metal is a sharp, crystalline noise, a reminder of the raw energy being used to tame the stone. For a few moments, the bed looks as though it were breathing, exhaling the day's chill in a fragrant cloud of heat. Once the warming pan is withdrawn, the servant replaces it with a hot stone, a smooth river rock that has been resting in the embers of the hearth for hours. The stone is wrapped in several layers of thick, dark felt to prevent it from burning the sheets, and it is tucked deep into the foot of the bed. You can feel the weight of it through the blankets, a solid and unmoving source of radiant heat that will last far longer than the fire in the pan. The smell of the heated felt is pungent and earthy, a scent that reminds you of sheep and wood smoke. This stone is your silent, steadfast companion for the night, a piece of the hearth brought into your private world. The tallow candle on your bedside chest has burned low, its flame now a tiny, trembling point of yellow light drowning in a pool of pale wax. The smell of the burning animal fat has grown heavier, a greasy and acrid scent that clings to the curtains of the bed. You watch as a single drop of wax rolls down the side of the iron holder, cooling into a hard white rib before it reaches the wood. This candle is the last light in your world, a fragile guardian that will soon surrender to the dark. You reach out to adjust the wick with a small iron trimmer. The metal snip, sounding sharp and final in the heavy silence of the chamber. You take a final sip of warmed, spiced ale from a small wooden mazer, the liquid tasting of honey, ginger, and the heat of the fire. The warmth travels down your throat and settles in your chest, a liquid fire that helps to loosen the tension in your shoulders. The wood of the cup is smooth against your lips, seasoned by years of use and smelling faintly of the cellar. As you set the cup down, you feel the first true wave of drowsiness wash over you, a heavy and peaceful weight that signals the body's readiness to surrender. The preparations are done. The armor is on, the bed is heated, and the night is waiting. With a slow and careful movement, you slide beneath the heavy wool and fur layers, your body finding the exact spot where the warming pan has left its golden trail of heat. The sensation is startling. A sudden, wonderful embrace of warmth that makes your breath catch for a moment. You stretch your legs down toward the felt-wrapped stone, feeling the solid heat radiate through your wool wraps. The bed curtains are pulled tight, and the world outside the fabric ceases to exist. You are now a prisoner of comfort, a traveler who has reached the end of the day's long trek and found a sanctuary made of cloth and fire. The silence inside the bed is profound, a muffled and thick atmosphere where the only sounds are the rhythmic beat of your heart and the soft hushing of your breath. You reach up one last time to ensure the nightcap is secure over your ears, the ties beneath your chin a gentle and familiar pressure. The weight of the fur coverlet above you is a physical reassurance, a heavy blanket of silence that keeps the castle's moaning wind at a distance. You realize that this moment, the transition from the freezing room to the heated bed, is the greatest luxury the medieval world can offer. You have outwitted the frost, at least for tonight. As your eyes finally close, you hear the distant, rhythmic clack of the night watchman's wooden rattle in the courtyard below, a sound that says the world is being guarded while you sleep. The candle gutters one last time and then goes out, leaving the room to the moonlight and the shadows. The scent of scorched linen and warm wool is your final sensory memory as you drift toward the first layers of deep slumber. The cold may continue to grow on the stone walls, and the drafts may continue to search for a gap, but they will not find you here. You are safe within the ritual, carried by the heat of the stone toward the dawn. Chapter 9. The Siege of Wind and Smoke. In the deepest hours of the night, the castle chamber becomes a theater of shifting elements, where the fragile warmth of the fire must be balanced against the suffocating presence of its own smoke. To survive the dark is to navigate the constant trade-off between the biting draft of the window and the gray haze of the hearth. The middle of the night has arrived, a heavy and silent hour where the castle seems to settle even deeper into its frozen foundations. Inside your bed curtains, the air is still and warm, but as you pull the heavy fabric back just an inch, you feel the sharp, icy sting of the room's atmosphere. The fire in the stone hearth has subsided into a low, pulsing mound of red embers, casting a faint rhythmic glow that barely reaches the foot of the bed. Above the hearth, a thin, persistent ribbon of gray smoke curls away from the coals, rising slowly toward the dark rafters. It moves with a lazy, liquid grace, a silent inhabitant of the room that lives in the space between the fire and the ceiling. You look toward the window, where the heavy wooden shutters are barred tight against the winter wind. The oak planks are nearly 3 inches thick, yet you can hear the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the wind as it strikes the exterior stone, a deep and vibrating sound that resonates through the timber. Along the edges of the shutter, where the wood meets the limestone frame, a delicate line of white frost has formed a crystalline seal. It looks like a forest of tiny silver ferns frozen in a state of eternal growth. Every time the wind gusts, a tiny puff of snow dust is forced through a microscopic gap, dancing briefly in the dim moonlight before falling to the floor. In some parts of the keep, the windows are not merely shutters, but frames covered in a sheet of oiled linen or thin, translucent horn. You can see the faint, amber glow of the moonlight as it filters through these materials, creating a hazy, dreamlike light that obscures the world outside. The oiled cloth is stretched tight, vibrating with a soft, drumming sound as the wind brushes against it. It is a fragile barrier, smelling faintly of linseed and old wax, providing a dim illumination that makes the stone walls look even deeper and more mysterious. The world outside is a blur of blue and silver, a cold reality that is kept at arm's length by a single layer of fabric. The fireplace, though massive in its construction, is a flawed and temperamental servant during these bitter hours. Because the chimney is a wide, vertical shaft designed to handle the roar of a great fire, it also acts as an invitation for the night air to descend. You watch as a sudden downdraft pushes a cloud of pale smoke back into the room, the haze swirling in slow, heavy circles before it settles near the ceiling. The smell of the smoke is thick and pungent, a mixture of charred oak, damp moss, and the faint sweet scent of seasoned pine. It is a dry, acrid perfume that clings to the wool of your curtains and the linen of your nightshirt. High above, the smoke has formed a permanent layer of gray mist that clings to the undersides of the timber beams. Over the decades, this haze has left a thick, velvety coating of black soot on the rafters, a dark residue that softens the angles of the architecture. You can see the way the flickering light of the embers catches the texture of this soot, making it look like a canopy of dark silk. The smoke-stained wood carries the history of 1,000 fires, a sensory record of every winter the castle has endured. It is a reminder that in this world, warmth always comes with a price, a haze that stings the eyes and weighs heavy in the lungs. The draft in the room is a living thing, a thin and invisible needle of cold that searches for any opening in your defenses. It snakes across the rush-covered floor, causing the dried stalks to rustle with a soft, papery sound, as if a ghost were walking past the bed. When the draft hits the heavy crimson curtains, the fabric sways almost imperceptibly, the bottom hem brushing the floor with a rhythmic shush-shush. You can feel the sharp change in temperature even through the thickness of the wool, a sudden drop that makes you pull the blankets closer to your chin. The room is a vessel of moving air, a constant negotiation between the heat of the hearth and the ice of the walls. You realize that the nightly struggle is one of balance. If you open the shutters to clear the smoke, the freezing wind will extinguish the last of your warmth. If you seal the room tight, the air grows heavy and thick with the haze of the fire. Most choose the smoke, preferring the acrid air to the lethal bite of the frost. You settle back into your pillows, watching the way the smoke haze distorts the flickering light of the single tallow candle. The air tastes of ash and thyme, a dry and gritty flavor that becomes a part of your dreams. It is the sensory reality of the keep, a world where the breath of the fire is both a blessing and a burden. The candle on the bedside chest is now a short, sputtering stub, its flame bowing low in the persistent draft. The blue smoke from the dying wick rises in a straight, thin line before being caught by a swirl of air and dissipated into the darkness. The smell of the hot wax and the burning tallow is strong now, a greasy scent that settles on the furniture like a fine mist. You watch as the flame gives a final, frantic pulse of yellow light, illuminating the frost on the window one last time before it vanishes into the black. The room is now left to the moonlight and the pulsing, ruby heart of the hearth embers. The stonefont's walls continue their silent work, sweeting with a fine sheen of condensation that glistens in the pale light. You can see a single drop of water as it crawls slowly down a limestone block, leaving a dark, wet trail behind it. The moisture is cold and heavy, a liquid manifestation of the battle between the interior air and the frozen earth outside. It drips onto the stone ledge with a soft, rhythmic tink, a tiny sound that seems to amplify the profound silence of the night. The dampness is everywhere, in the tapestries, in the floorboards, and in the very marrow of the castle's ancient and unmoving bones. In the final hour, before the first hint of gray light, the air in the chamber reaches its most stagnant and heavy state. The fire has cooled, the drafts have slowed, and the smoke has settled into a thick, silent blanket that hangs just above your head. You can feel the soot as a fine grit on the surface of the coverlet, a microscopic layer of the hearth that has traveled through the air to rest with you. Every inhale is a quiet effort, a slow draw of the heavy, scented air that keeps your body alive in the stone box. You are a passenger in the dark, waiting for the world to turn toward the sun. The trade-off between the wind and the smoke is the fundamental rhythm of the medieval night, a cycle of survival that repeats with every winter moon. You have learned to breathe the haze and ignore the whistle of the draft, finding a middle ground where sleep is finally possible. The castle remains a fortress of stone, but inside your curtains, you have created a sanctuary of habit and endurance. The smoke-stained rafters are the roof of your world, and the frost-sealed shutters are your shield. You drift toward the end of the night, your mind filled with the gray and orange colors of the dying fire. The transition from the deep, smoky night to the pale clarity of the dawn is a slow and silent shift. You can sense the air beginning to thin as the temperature drops to its lowest point, just before the sun breaks the horizon. The fire is now a bed of white ash, its work nearly done, and the room is a temple of blue shadows and silver frost. We move now toward the final hour, where the castle wakes from its icy slumber, and the first light of morning touches the stone. The long siege of the night is coming to its quiet, frozen conclusion. Chapter 10. The Pale Light of the Castle Dawn. The long siege of the night finally begins to lift, as the deep indigo of the midnight hours gives way to a thin, hesitant gray. This is the hour of the castle's deepest cold, when the fires have vanished into ash and the stone walls have reached their most frigid state. It is a time of slow awakening, where the body must reluctantly leave the sanctuary of the blankets to meet the frost of a new winter day. The silence of the bedchamber changes as the first light of dawn begins to press against the wooden shutters. It is not a bright or golden light, but a pale, watery gray that filters through the tiny gaps in the oak planks, illuminating the dust motes that hang motionless in the freezing air. The deep shadows of the room begin to lose their sharp edges, turning into soft, charcoal smudges against the limestone walls. You can see the heavy bed curtains more clearly now, their crimson wool looking dark and muted in the early light. The air is at its most still, a hollow and expectant atmosphere that marks the transition from dreams to the reality of the stone. Inside your cocoon of wool and fur, you stir for the first time, your muscles feeling stiff and heavy from the long hours of stillness. As you move your hand toward the edge of the blankets, the air above the covers hits your skin like a physical blow, a sharp and biting cold that makes your breath catch. You see a thick, white cloud of mist form before your face, a ghost of your own internal warmth that lingers in the air for several seconds before dissipating. The bed is still warm, a small island of life in a sea of ice, and the temptation to pull the furs over your head and hide from the morning is an almost overwhelming weight. You look toward the hearth, where the fire has finally surrendered to the night. The logs that roared so defiantly hours ago are now nothing but a mound of fine, white ash, looking like a drift of fallen snow inside the stone fireplace. A few small black cinders remain, their heat entirely spent, leaving the iron fire back cold and unresponsive. The smell of the room has shifted from the pungent scent of active smoke to a dry, dusty aroma of cold soot and old embers. It is the scent of a fire that has finished its work, leaving the chamber to face the dawn alone. The frost on the window shutters has grown into an intricate, crystalline landscape during the night. In the pale gray light, the patterns look like silver ferns and frozen spiderwebs, clinging to the wood with a brittle, shimmering tenacity. You can see where the moisture of your breath has added new layers to the ice, creating a thick, white rime that seals the edges of the planks. The wind has died down to a low, rhythmic moan, a tired sound that seems to match the slow pulse of the castle. The world outside is a silent white wilderness, and the stone walls are the only barrier keeping it at bay. On the bedside table, the ceramic wash basin is now a solid block of ice. The water has frozen entirely, its surface bulging slightly, and covered in a network of fine, internal cracks that catch the morning light. You reach out and touch the surface with your knuckle, the ice feeling slick, hard, and painfully cold against your skin. It does not give way. It is a miniature frozen lake, a silent witness to the temperature of the room during the dark hours. The sight of the frozen basin is a stark reminder of the ritual that awaits you. The breaking of the ice and the shock of the freezing water against your face. A soft, metallic clack sounds from the gallery outside, followed by the slow, heavy groan of the door hinges. A servant enters quietly, his shoulders hunched against the cold and his feet muffled by thick wool wraps. He carries a small iron shovel and a fresh bundle of dry kindling, his movements slow and practiced as he kneels before the cold hearth. You watch from behind the curtains as he begins the rhythmic task of reviving the fire. The sound of the iron scraping against the stone, a sharp and domestic music in the quiet. He blows softly into the ashes, searching for a single hidden spark that might have survived the night. A tiny orange glow begins to pulse deep within the white ash, a heartbeat of fire that slowly catches the thin slivers of pine kindling. The servant feeds the flame with a steady hand, adding larger sticks until a small, cheerful crackle begins to fill the room. The smell of fresh, resinous smoke rises from the hearth, a sharp and promising scent that signals the return of warmth to the keep. The orange light flickers against the limestone blocks, chasing away the gray shadows of the dawn and reflecting in the frost on the windows. It is a fragile beginning, but it is the first victory of the new day. You finally find the resolve to pull back the heavy fur coverlet, the weight of the blankets sliding away with a soft, hushing sound. The transition is a shock. The cold air of the room wrapping around your linen nightshirt like a wet shroud. Your joints ache with a dull, persistent throb as you sit up, the straw mattress beneath you giving a loud, papery crunch. You reach for your wool cloak, which has been resting on the cedar chest, and pull it around your shoulders. The fabric is freezing, but it provides a necessary shield as you prepare to leave the sanctuary of the bed. Stepping onto the floor, the rushes beneath your feet feel crisp and brittle, their grassy scent released in a final, morning burst as you tread upon them. The flagstones are so cold they seem to burn through your wool stockings, a deep and radiating chill that moves up your legs and into your spine. You move toward the hearth, drawn to the growing light of the fire like a moth. The heat is still weak, barely reaching past the stone ledge, but the sight of the dancing flames is a psychological comfort. You hold your hands toward the fire, watching the color return to your pale fingers in the flickering orange glow. Outside, the first true beam of sunlight strikes the castle battlements, a thin and watery gold that touches the top of the towers before sliding down the stone. You can hear the distant, rhythmic sounds of the castle waking, the clank of a bucket in the courtyard, the far-off bark of a hound, and the heavy thud of a drawbridge being lowered. The smoke from the kitchens begins to rise in a straight, white column into the still, blue air of the morning. The siege of the night is over. The frost remains, and the air is still biting, but the world has turned once more toward the light. The memory of the long, freezing hours begins to fade as the fire takes hold of the heavy oak logs. You stand before the hearth, your cloak wrapped tight, watching the ice in the wash basin begin to sweat and melt. The night was long, the drafts were many, and the stone was unforgiving, but you have endured. You take a slow, deep breath of the smoky air, feeling the warmth of the fire finally begin to touch your skin. The castle dawn is gray and cold, but it is a new beginning, a quiet triumph of life over the winter dark. Thank you for staying with me through this long, cold night in the heart of the stone keep. If you felt the chill of the castle walls and the warmth of the firs tonight, I invite you to gently like this video and subscribe to join our future journeys through the shadows of time. I would love to hear in the comments where you were listening from as the dawn broke. For now, let the first light of the morning settle around you and carry the quiet strength of the night into your day. The fire is rising, the frost is melting, and the story has found its rest.